Bernie Sanders did upset people on the left by going on Flagrant, which is Andrew Schulz and his buddies podcast. And we're going to go ahead and jump into it. But before we do, just a reminder that I used to be a part of the boy bubble and I used to watch it as a viewer. And I used to really enjoy jumping into sort of men's brains. And we mean men on a binary scale because obviously gender is a construct. And the men in this bubble, the way they know that they're men, the way that they identify and move through the world as men is sort of rooted in their idea of men through the patriarchy and through the lens of toxic masculinity. So often with these bubbles, you hear a lot of misogynistic jokes, a lot of racist jokes. And Andrew is obviously somebody who's been under scrutiny for a while and has even recently been in the news for a lot of reasons in terms of his participation in uplifting Trump as a candidate. And with the way that the administration is going, though he has faith that maybe it will work out, he claims himself to be more of a neutral party who's not endorsing. But, you know, what does that mean really at the end of the day? So he went on trigonometry. You guys know I don't like trigonometry as a channel. I think anyone who goes on trigonometry is a red flag. I think anyone who's willing to work with these sort of centrist libs who say that they're liberal and for freedom, but ultimately only end up talking badly about progressive movements are not good people. Though philosophically, they're good people because what does good and bad even mean philosophically? Just in terms of progression and openness and kindness towards marginalized communities, I think these channels are bad. And I want to give you a snippet of why Andrew is considered inherently misogynistic for a lot of people, but also like his way of talking about things is obviously through a comedic lens, but comedic lenses, comedians in some sort of way are philosophers. Like that's what's so interesting about the Dave Chappelle's is people say that on one hand, you know, comedians shouldn't be taken seriously, but in other ways, like the gesture is the person between the elite and the common man, that the gesture is supposed to be able to make fun of the king without the king executing them on behalf of the people. And so when I look back at old comedy and think about the comedy that I really liked, it was always comedy that challenged the status quo. And yet even the comedians themselves that challenged the status quo fell, I think as they got more famous, into a problematic categorization because they ended up, instead of being the rebel against the system, working on behalf of the system. So here's a little clip from Andrew on trigonometry. I just want you to get a feel for how he talks about being sort of a lifelong Democrat and growing up in a liberal home and his idea of what the Democrats used to represent, okay, versus how the Republicans feel to him now.
It switched so much. You know, when I was younger, like Democrats were cool. They were getting their dick sucked in the office. They were like, right? They were like supportive of like hip hop music. They said, do whatever you want. Like, we don't want to be in your bedroom. They were cool with gay people. Like, it was cool to be a Democrat. Now, conservatives got 3 baby mamas. The president got 3 baby mamas. He's getting pussy left and right, right? He's cool. He's the one saying, say whatever the fuck you want. So now conservatives have become Democrats. So I don't think I've changed. I just like the dudes that get pussy and say whatever they want. So it's you want me to be a Democrat again? Get some pussy. Tell me to say whatever I want. I'm there.
But also the people who are behaving like Democrats as conservatives were Democrats a few years ago.
Yes. That's what.
Okay. So let's listen. So obviously if we deconstructed that whole sentiment, and I know he's a comedian, so he's saying it a little hyperbolically, but ultimately getting dick sucked in the White House is a president who is married, having an affair, putting an intern in a precarious situation in which the power dynamic was incredibly inappropriate, leading to what I believe is ultimately a sexual assault, given that Monica Lewinsky years later perceives it as a very inappropriate relationship. But at the time, of course, young and stupid and naive, as we all are when we're young, being put in a position where this powerful, charismatic leader sits there and goes, you are special. And then you're stupid enough to believe it. Your stupidity does not excuse their predatory behavior. So she's a victim, right? So I'm team Monica Lewinsky in that regard. But the fact that Andrew hasn't updated his understanding of what happened in that Oval Office tells me that he is still in that sort of Democrat bubble in which the Democrats of today, the ones I talk to personally, still love Bill Clinton and still hate Monica Lewinsky, which is the misogyny of it all, right? It is the misogyny of it all. Okay. They blame Monica for his infidelity. Just put that together. Then he says, oh, I want a guy who, you know, gets his dick sucked and tells me I can do whatever I want. So his value of a man, the coolness level of a man, is how much pussy he can get, how many girls can suck his dick. All of that is misogyny, right? All of that is using women as an object to inflate your sense of importance and your sort of the idea of equating freedom to getting your dick sucked is like a very interesting idea because it doesn't take into account the sexual partner who's sucking the dick, right? So I hear this and, you know, he goes, oh, the president has baby mamas. First of all, in what bubble is having multiple baby mamas cool? So much as a circumstance of toxicity and generational trauma. I don't know any bubble that really thinks having multiple baby mamas is cool, so much as that we shouldn't demonize the people put into a situation to repeat generational curses because there are no healthy relationships to observe, right? So I don't really know what that's about, but I think it's interesting that he doesn't understand that the Democrats who supported hip hop back in the day were probably more inclined to be Tupac and Biggie listeners, instead of what Republicans listen to, which is like Tom, what's that guy's name? What's the white Tom McDonald and like you know, all of those guys. Like, this is a different, we're not, and maybe white guys are listening to Ye talk about Hitler. You know what I mean? It's not the same hip hop. It's not the same rap. It's not the same relationship with music or expression. And so when we're having these conversations, no, Jelly Roll, no, Tom McDonald, isn't that his name? I think that is his name. Hold on. Now I got to look it up. McDonald. Yeah, Tom McDonald. I love that you guys don't know who that is, actually. That's kind of great. Actually love that. That actually makes me so happy for you. 5 million subscribers. And he's a rapper, a white guy. You know what I mean? Like fake woke, snowflakes, no lives matter, the system, no response, white boy, like this politically brainwashed. He has a song with Ben Shapiro. Do you guys know this? I don't want to get copyrighted. They can't cancel my message because I'm just kidding. Oh my God, I almost just gagged on screen. I'm sorry. We're very mature. Stay grounded, Brittany. Don't make a joke. Don't make a joke. Okay. Wow, I almost died. I almost had a heart attack watching that. Thank you. Conservative rap really ruins my day. Let me tell you, it really hurts my soul. Okay, Republicans love to think of themselves as counterculture and they're the rebels and everyone's against them. Being a white man is so hard and, you know, okay. So Bernie Sanders goes on Flagrant and it upset people on the left who felt like, didn't we tell you Bernie Sanders can't be trusted? Because Bernie at the end of the day did not as much as he could have to protect Palestinians, obviously. And him and AOC might be on this tour about like anti-oligarchs, but at the end of the day, like, you know what I mean? What is that doing? And I also understand why people were critical of Hassan for talking to Bernie and AOC. And I also understand why Hassan, when playing the political game, is associating with those people. Because at the end of the day, again, politics isn't about truth. It's about winning. So Hassan wants to win, and I think that's fine. I do philosophy work because I want to know what the truth is, but I think these are different categories that tend to overlap, so everyone's critical for different reasons. Okay, let's watch this segment of Flagrant together. This is about 30 minutes in.
I have to ask this. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you. We have a question we want to ask about what happened to you in 2016 with this Bernie Bros movement, where your followers are seeing they have a racism problem, a misogyny problem. Do you think that's a super PAC thing behind that?
That was the Democratic establishment. That was the.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, that was just, they were sitting there. We had a lot of young people. We had people of color, and you know, they create this kind of myth with the help of the corporate media and all that stuff.
You know, it's kind of interesting to that note is during this election, the podcast space, which the Democrats largely avoided, they feel had some influence in the election. And they started to label us the podcast bros and said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
Yeah, that's what the liberal elite China does. They run away. Look, again, I would hope that everybody who's watching the program is that we as a nation have got to end all forms of bigotry, right?
Yes.
That I start off as a basic assumption.
Unless it's to your close friends, right?
Yeah, whether it's racism or sexism, homophobia, or xenophobia, whatever it is. But, and, you know, liberal Democrats talk about that all the time. And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
That you're black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
Exactly.
You're gay, that's fine, who cares?
Yeah.
But what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Is every gay person brilliant and wonderful and great? No, of course not. Everybody's a human being.
Yeah.
So the issue is what you stand for, which gets you back to what we discussed earlier, class politics, in the sense of which side are you on? Are you going to stand?
Chad said, what led to this? Why is Bernie mad at the left? Probably because they're critical of him. Like, they're just critical of him. At his rallies, like, Palestinian flags were being taken down. People were being silenced. He's not doing everything he can to protect Palestinians. You know what I mean? So, yeah, like, of course. Now, listen, Chad says, what's going on? I thought Bernie was more progressive. He was progressive for the time. For the time. This is what I've been screaming at people. George Carlin was progressive for the time. You're no longer progressive. Like, for the time, yes, you are like the most progressive person. You're not anymore. Joe Rogan was progressive for the time. And then as we get more actually progressive, actual liberation occurs, yeah, you become more conservative. The reason I say all Republican policy is bad and we shouldn't be negotiating with terrorists, i.e. Republicans, is because in the future, in a progressive dominant world, we'll be arguing with liberals and liberals will be the new conservatives. Because they are ultimately very much the white people who are like, it's cool if people are trans, but not my kids. Or I love black people. They're so smart, actually. Yeah, I don't want to hang out with you, bro. Ultimately, it's good compared to people lynching people in the streets, but it's not so good next to actually what we want for liberation. So yeah, Bernie was good, but outdated. People say Carlin is still relevant today. Carlin is not as relevant as you think he is through a progressive lens. He is absolutely, he runs into the same problem all white men do. They think they really figured it out. You didn't figure it out. You're stating the obvious and everyone thinks you're a genius. Like, no offense to Carlin, he also had his own faults in terms of how he criticized the system or people. And maybe that's for another podcast or another stream one day. Maybe that would be a good podcast for me to do. And I say this as a person who used to love Carlin. I used to love all of these men. As a woman who suffered from internalized masculinity or toxic masculinity most of her life, I tell you the way I would snort up all of these white men and their bubbles who talk about liberation in the system. I'm telling you, once you deconstruct it all, you realize like, oh, yeah, they don't really get it the way you think they get it, but it feels really good at the time. Okay, it does feel good. Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, Bernie, all of them. It feels really good at the time until you realize like, oh, we got to deconstruct this. This isn't good enough. They stop. They reach the ceiling of their bubble pop and then they stop. They don't actually keep going. And so they miss a lot of why being marginalized, like in this situation when Bernie says, oh, the left, they just think all black people are so great. All gay people are so great. No one on the left believes that. That is not a talking point. That's a reality in any of our bubbles. That is not a thing that is happening. We absolutely are very critical of other gay, black, people of color, queer people. Like, we're very critical of each other. It makes no sense for Bernie Sanders to go on this podcast and pretend like leftists are sitting here uplifting black people simply because they're black or gay people simply because they're gay. That's not happening. That's happening in Democrat bubbles. Yeah, Pete Buttigieg, he's gay. Good enough. Harris, she's brown. Good enough. Yeah, it's happening in the Democrat bubbles. But it is not happening in the leftist bubbles. Okay, do not put that on us because we are very critical. Don't we always get the criticism of like being too judgmental of our own side? So no, we're not doing that. Maybe some Midwest Democrat is doing it. But that's why people were upset with like, see, this is why Bernie, at the end of the day, it's over. It's over in that sense. Like, he's not the person everyone wanted him to be 10 years ago, right?
With working families, are you going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage or not? Are you going to fight to guarantee health care to all people or not? Are you going to demand that the wealthiest people start paying their fair share of taxes or not? Those are the issues. And no one cares what color you are, what your gender is, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yes. Nobody cares. Of course, nobody cares if you're gay, if you're black. When has America ever cared if you were gay or black? You guys, honestly, I don't agree. This is sarcasm. Do not clip me. Why would he say that? Why would he say that out loud?
I'm sorry, I do feel like vowing to stop taking super PAC money is a great first step, but also being an honest politician. You put up a bill to stop the sale of weapons to Israel, and there's no amount of money AIPAC can spend to not get you reelected. And I feel if we had more honest politicians, then
courageous ones.
Yeah,
You raised this is a very well, this is a good discussion.
Why are you shocked?
I'm shocked because I don't ask you questions that are not often asked.
This episode has been promoted by Walter O'Malley's Foundation.
All right. It's a painful issue. I mean, because I deal with it every day in Washington. You're running for office. If you
Also, a good point, chat says, I think people forget Bernie's also 82 years old. That's a good point. I mean, the man is old. You know, so even old people are going to struggle. I remember my favorite clip. If I can find it, I'll add it into this this segment because I'm going to clip this segment for everybody else who doesn't get to stream. And there's a hilarious clip of Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton talking about trans people. And Chelsea said something and Hillary is so confused and she doesn't know how to react. And I just remember laughing at the difference of the generations because there was like an obvious clear divide. And this is why we look to the youth for progressive values, because the youth, they're in the know. Like the youth don't have the wisdom and discernment of the old, but the old don't have the freshness of the new. We need each other. We need to know how old people establish things, and we need young people to bring in the new ideas. Because young people, we have, well, I'm getting into the old person bubble now, but like when I was younger, I know that I was ahead of the older people in my communities, and I'm still trying to be ahead of them now. But at the end of the day, the youth know something. They're sort of like a premonition of the next 10 years in a sense. Like they know what's going to happen. So again, like I think we have to work together, these two communities. But anyways, if I find that clip, I will share it because it is so funny.
in your heart understand what's going on in Gaza right now, and again, it's almost painful to talk about it. The United States is complicit in the starvation of children as we speak right this moment. Okay, mass malnutrition, etc. And you say that's wrong, man. And I'm not going to give Netanyahu another nickel, but I know that the day I say that, AIPAC is going to pour a huge amount of money. So what's the choice you have? The choice you have is, okay, they're going to throw a lot of money at me, but I'm going to make this a major campaign issue.
Ooh.
I ain't going to run away from it.
Yeah.
What do we stand for as a nation? And I'll tell you something, getting back to the Democratic Party. What the Democratic establishment people say, well, Gaza, yeah, it's an issue out there, but it's not the main issue. It's not the pocketbook issues, more important. Healthcare is more important. But you know what? I'll tell you this is my own view, is what people have a sense, consciously and unconsciously, if you are turning your back on starving children in Gaza, why the hell am I going to trust you on anything?
It's a great point.
Is that a fair point?
I think it's a very fair point. I think if you turn your back on starvation in general, especially if you're complicit in it, I think that's where a lot of, at least voters feel like there is some sort of separation. And if you make them realize that there isn't, right? If we are protecting or funding or rewarding this in any way, then you are complicit. But I think voters feel like they're too derivative from it. They're like, oh, well, that's not exactly what I'm voting for. And I do think, not to undermine those other issues, but I do think the kitchen table issues, I think those are incredibly important. And I think the more that people are struggling internally in our country, the less of a concern we have externally. So it is a tough balance. If you make your entire,
I mean, that is literally true though. The worry people have is like what they talk about around the kitchen table. And if everything, all the basics are met, then you end up talking about problems outside of your family because you have the spoons and the energy to do that, right? So that's kind of important to pay attention to, and that's why America is struggling, and that's why they got to stop blaming it on the Democrats. Like purely, it is just the system. The system that we have won't allow anyone to rise to power without there being like a degree of corruption and at the expense of somebody, usually the people, right? Chad says, how do we divide liberals, leftists, and progressives in this bubble? Andrew Schulz and his crew are like Democrats who vote Republican or vote Democrat, depending on the candidate. So they're centristy boys. And Bernie is a liberal Democrat with some progressive values, i.e. known for socialism. But nobody here is actually like I don't know, like representing there's so many factions of the left, but nobody is more left than that at this table here today.
campaign about Gaza, the people in whatever small area that you represent will go, hey, listen, that's horrible what's happening over here.
Right, you're
But we're
exactly
struggling
right.
too, so don't forget about us.
You got it. You got it right.
So how do you balance those two?
Well, that's what politics is about. I mean, you make.
I feel like you've done it well. I feel like you talk way more about internal issues than external ones.
I do. And Gaza then becomes a moral issue that you cannot run away from.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, why are we where we are?
You know what's funny too is I don't think boys are willing to admit this, but it's so obvious to me that boys want to be liked and they seek validation. They want to be in the cool boys club. And since Trump feels like one of the cool boys, they really want to be a part of that. The podcast bros makes them feel powerful. We saw this with what did they call themselves on the internet? Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and the Weinstein brothers. They came out. So Harris, Dawkins, there was like the four horsemen, the dark horsemen or whatever in the atheist bubble. And then they came out on the internet as something else. I forget what they called themselves. And now there's the podcast bros. So boys themselves, intellectual dark web. Thank you, chat. Intellectual dark web. And then Elon's like dark MAGA. Look, I'm only laughing because it's so human. But it's so human of them to deny that they're doing it, and they're not like nerdy boys who are all coming together like, we're the intellectual dark web, actually, So when we have these conversations, I think it'd be really great if the boys admitted that they also fall, they feel the pressure of wanting to be a part of the cool boys club, which is where the Theo Von stuff comes in. Even Philip DeFranco covered Theo, and I covered Theo too in the last podcast last week about Theo coming out, basically free Palestine. But at the same time, I called it a genocide and everything. He had some people agreeing with him, some people disagreeing with him, and then some people sharing my sentiment of criticism, which was like, thanks for calling out the genocide. But also, why are you, doing opening acts for Trump, who wants to make it the Riviera of the Middle East? Why are you doing that then? And again, this is the battle that all of us have. You meet people, you see that they're cool, they're down to earth, you're getting along with them. There's a vibe, there's something wholesome happening. And then you realize, though, even though they have such a good, quote, personality, they're honestly enacting a lot of really horrible things at the expense of really innocent people, or just inappropriately at the expense of people. And so that's where we come to this complicated part of being a person. How do I know this person in such a beautiful way? And then I have to come to the realization that this person is also doing really horrible things, right?
And it's a funny thing, I was talking to my staff when we were driving in today and reviewing, there was I think it was Pew, P-E-W, they do these
polls?
Yeah, they do things. And they asked the question, I may be a little bit wrong here, but they said they do it. They say, are you better off today than somebody in your situation, middle class, whatever you are, were 40 years ago? That's the question.
Yeah.
What do you think the answer was?
This is an insane statistic. I've seen this research. They're like, that people are making inflation adjusted the same wage that they were making 50 years ago.
I don't mean that. I don't even mean statistically. I'm going beyond that.
Are you better off than somebody?
How do you feel? Do you think somebody in your condition was living better 40 years ago, or are you living better today?
I think the average person would say no.
That's right. That's an astonishing. All right. Let's go through the economics of it, and then we'll go through the broader issue. Economics. This is an amazing fact. And again, it's something that people don't talk about because you got a lot of the Republicans want to make change. It's almost always the wrong kind of change. And the Democrats want to maintain the status quo, which is unsustainable. Yeah. That's what the choices that people have.
Yeah.
All right.
But sometimes if the status quo is horrible, any change looks better. And I think
which is why Donald Trump is the president.
That's what I think a lot of Democrats don't understand. Like, you've been very critical. We're lifelong, I can't speak for everybody, but like I grew up in New York City, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and we were very critical of the Democratic establishment. And it was through the lens of, hey, you're not addressing the concerns of the people.
But if Andrew voted for Trump, then being a lifelong Democrat doesn't mean anything. And also being a lifelong Democrat is not a brag. Being a lifelong Republican is not a brag. Do you know what I'm saying? So for Andrew to say, my parents are liberal, I grew up Democrat. Yeah, but you picking Trump now doesn't matter. Just because the Democrats are doing badly doesn't mean you vote Trump. Just because the Democrats suck doesn't mean you vote Trump. And again, I'm not saying he voted for Trump because I haven't heard him explicitly say he has, but it's assumed that he did. If anyone has any proof that he literally says I voted for Trump, let me know. But I haven't heard it with my own ears, so I don't want to say that I have. But that's the assumption because he had him on and all that stuff. He talks highly of the administration. That's the dilemma. That's the dilemma. Is like, okay, but how do you justify then voting for Trump just because the Democrats suck?
people. And by doing that, we were framed in a way that I think, and we continue to be framed in a way I think it was very unfair.
Oh, you don't know nothing about being framed.
I
don't feel sorry for you.
But it's just a refusal to look in the mirror.
That's exactly right. All right, here's a fact. This is an astounding fact. Nobody talks about it. And this is the other thing. More important.
Chad said he says he did. I'm sure he did. I can't speak as a Brittany. I am a public figure and I don't want to spread misinformation. But I assume he did somewhere say he voted for Trump. Let me look it up.
Anything else is people want to say, do you know what is going on in my life? Yeah. And if you don't talk about that reality, no one's going to trust you at all.
Yeah.
All right, fact.
But let's call people Latinx, Bernie.
That's right. That's the issue. All right. Over the last 52 years, I may be off a little bit here, but more or less I'm right. Over the last 52 years, there's been an explosion in technology, right? This stuff that we're looking at did not exist. Every worker in America is more productive, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, computers, etc. How much have real inflation accounted for wages increased in that 52-year time? Obviously, with all of that worker productivity increasing,
nothing.
He said in an interview with Variety that the comedian interviewing Trump was not an endorsement, and I don't believe in endorsing candidates. I'm a comedian, and I didn't want to go to the inauguration either. They were very kind to invite me, but it wasn't for me. Which is true. He said that on Trigonometry too, that he didn't want to go. But let's see. Oh, what I've realized is you've got to have empathy on how people see you based on the way we consume information. You can't be angry that people didn't want to do an 8-hour deep dive and find exactly how nuanced you are and like what your thought process is. I grew up in a fucking dance family and an arts family in New York City. Do you really think they've been right wing my entire life? No, but I've been a Democrat my entire life. Schulz says also does not believe that having Trump on his podcast impacted the election, although it wouldn't bother me if people thought it did. Not at all, but I don't think we did. I think America had the right to make up their mind. I think a lot of people assumed that the vote for Trump was because okay, this is so fucking like not true though. We know that influencers influence. I know that when I came out on my stream saying like, I've registered to vote, I'm voting from Croatia. I know people in my audience told me, Brittany, I registered to vote. I signed up. You really inspired me to like vote this election season. So even me with absolutely very small YouTube audience was able to influence the few people in my audience to get out and vote. So for him to say that I don't think my podcast made a difference, well, that's a little that's, it's like, it obviously did, my bro. Okay, let's go back to this.
Must be making a lot more money, right?
Nothing.
0%.
Zero.
Yeah.
In fact, there's an argument it's a little bit less in real housing costs, healthcare costs.
Because TVs are cheaper, you think that you're living a more luxurious lifestyle.
But take a deep breath about that fact. What does it say? Meanwhile, during that same period of time, there was a massive, according to RAND Corporation, not a socialist organization, there was a massive transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%.
But Bernie, surely they're paying taxes on all that new profits they're making, right?
Right. Right. But that is getting back to this important issue, which I kind of started, what is reality? So if you're the average worker out there,
Yes, sir.
you're seeing people on the top getting phenomenally rich, you're no better off. And by the way, the likelihood is your kid is going to be worse off than you are, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough reality. Why is that? Who the hell is even talking about? A, why is that? And B, what the hell do we do about
And
it?
I think that was the appeal of Trump, is he appeared to be talking to us.
Exactly.
Whereas Democrats are kind of condescending and ignoring it.
Right. Essentially, Democrats say, status quo is working okay. We're going to tinker around the edges, make a little bit of a change here. Trump says the whole goddamn system is broken. Yeah. But he said, I will fix it.
Yeah.
Well, his solutions will make it worse. But he at least acknowledged that the system is broken. Democrats often don't.
They don't acknowledge.
Honestly, sometimes all people need is for you to acknowledge and validate their feelings. And I don't know why people aren't getting this, except that sometimes we feel like it's not our job to do the emotional labor. But if you're a politician, you got to pay attention to these things. But people just want to feel validated. Every Nazi white supremacist who comes out of that bubble will tell you the only reason they got into it is somebody validated their feelings. Now, I'm not going to do that emotional work of validating some man who comes to me and says, because I'm white, I'm suffering. Like, girl, you can talk to a therapist about that, because I can't join you where you are in that regard. Now, if you come to me and say, I'm really struggling as a man and finding my place in the world, man, I can really feel that, but to say like, oh, as a white man, I'm struggling, like I have no way to relate to that personally. And I can't understand it. Like I can't process it as a reality for you, because I couldn't even imagine that to be true unless you're consuming very specific podcasts or news outlets, or reading certain things, or not doing your due diligence and research, or not looking at the statistics, right? So, wait, I lost my train of thought because I read chat. Chat, you're so beautiful and distracting. Oh, so the Democrats do need to work on validating people's perspectives. But the issue is that at the end of the day, Republicans and Democrats are much more alike than they are different. And I think that that's what we have to pay attention to. But that difference does exist. And that's what I need you to pay attention to, is that even though they are more alike than we think, they are also different. And that difference is enough not to vote Republican. Because I don't want you to hear me and think, well, if they're not that different, I guess I'll vote Republican. No, don't do that. But in some ways, they are similar enough in which we should be critical of both.
Acknowledge it. And there's a lot of finger wagging, or at least recently. I didn't feel that when I was growing up, but at least recently there's a lot of finger. And then there's almost like this detachment from working class people, which is really sad because you'll see them echo certain sentiments. They'll be like, look at the Biden stock market. And it's like, guys, 50% of Americans aren't even invested in the fucking stock market. Like, you're so detached from working class people.
But that's the problem. We are not educating the American populace to be invested in the stock market. So the only people who remain rich in this country are people with the privilege of the knowledge of how to invest in the stock market. I remember 10 years ago or so, I had a friend in the King community who was more Republican adjacent, though he was liberal himself. His parents were kind of more Republican. They owned businesses and stuff. And he would tell me, Brittany, you've got to invest in the stock market. And I was like, I don't even know what you mean when you say that. Like, I am so ignorant to this bubble. I have no concept of what you even mean when you say that. And he was a tech guy. A lot of my friends in Seattle were tech guys. A lot of them are still tech people. And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And they're like, you have got to put money in the stock market. And they're right. Had I put money on some version of the stock market, I would have had something to show for it now, all these years later. And I would continue to show for it 50 years from now. But I haven't done that. I'm not in that bubble. If you are in the bubble in which you have any money in the stock market, you are ahead of most of America. And that's good. I think we should be a part of America. I think we should invest in our economy. I think it's good that we should educate the populace. We should bring people up from poverty and into somewhat of a middle class existence, right? If not more. And, for the lack of better words. But I think that the problem is, like, we don't even know these things. Chelsea talks about this on the Financial Diet all the time, that I know it's easy to dismiss investing in the stock market, but the reality is the system only works a specific way right now. And we don't do the work so it changes in our lifetime. We do the work so it changes in hundreds of years from now. And so we have to invest in the version of the stock market the way we see it, which is why we're asking billionaires to invest in the market and not just their wallets. Because if billionaires were actually paying their fair share, they would also be investing in the system, social security and Medicaid and Medicare, and, helping with food stamps and helping with welfare and helping the communities. We should be engaging in our communities, uplifting our communities. And that's another struggle that progressives run into when they use verbiage like, hey, we should be a community and not individualistic. But by being a community, does that also mean putting money into the community? Because a lot of us don't have the money to put into, but also we have to talk about that, right? Chet says stocks are gambling. Stocks aren't gambling the way you think it is. From my limited understanding of the stock market, if you do daily stock trading and you're doing that, sure. But if you're talking about stocks over a certain length of time, over time, it's just a different kind of gamble. But you know what's more of a gamble? Not doing it. And it's why people in their elder years aren't getting enough on Social Security and they are having to work until their 90s. So again, like, we have to think about what that means and what feels more like a gamble. For me, it feels like a gamble either way. And it feels like one has a more just statistical return rate. And that's all you're looking at, guys. You're not looking at your feelings. You're looking at the math. And so from my understanding, the math is the math. Because right now, if you are holding out as a millennial for Social Security, like, we're playing different games. You know what I mean? But you have to be smart in how you invest, which is hard because we're not educated to be smart in how to invest. I knew of a woman on a story I saw on a podcast who had put money into her Roth, but had never assigned it. And so all those years later, she thought her money was working for her, only to find out it was never assigned to anything. So she wasn't actually getting any money back. You can't just put money into your Roth. And so that's the problem, is people think, oh, just put money into my Roth. I know what that means. You have to know what that means. You have to know what it means. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's just educating herself on it now, no wonder the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. We are not given the same education. We're just not getting the same education. And again, I I might not like how the rich operate, but I am trying to figure out why they maintain their power and what can I do that's adjacent, that's also within my values. There are a few things, and I think you should look into it. If not for the sake of yourself, for the sake of maybe your kids or your grandkids, or maybe just your parents or people who can help you, you know? So you can have all the, like, you do you. We're all going to end up doing whatever we're going to do for our families. I'm just saying it might not be, limiting yourself doesn't make sense to me, but you do you, right?
You don't even know the talking points to make them feel good about the economy. Right. So how do you
lie to them properly?
Yeah, it's like so what happened? How do we get here with the Democrat establishment?
It's a great question.
Well, and the answer is that we do know, and that is during the 70s, 60s, Democrats caught on that you could raise a lot of money from wealthy people, and so it gets back to campaign financing and all that stuff. So you got a democratic establishment now, which is funded by wealthy people. You have consultants who are really way out of touch with reality, who make a whole lot of money in campaigns, and working class is ignored. Donald Trump comes along and says, I care about you, which was a lie. So
I don't know if that's a lie. I'd give pushback on that. I think that it has to be proven that it's a lie.
All right, I'll prove it.
Yes, thank you. And you're right, I could look through rose-colored glasses, but the idea, I think that when people are struggling, anybody who goes, hey, I'm going to help you out. Like I'm sure when I remember the impact of Obama.
Change.
He ran on reform and he ran on hope, right?
Yes.
He ran on this idea of we're going to make it better for you, instead of Kamala seemed to run on this idea like, hey, it's good, we're going to keep doing the exact same thing. Right. Which is a losing strategy.
You got it.
So
that was her bloody consult. I mean, I know Kamala. She's a friend. She's very smart. That was what her bloody consultants told her to say. I begged them. I'm just between you.
Why can't she push back? Like at a certain, like,
you're right. Look, there's no argument.
This is the problem I think a lot of voters had, is like they didn't even know if it was her. We didn't even know if Biden was president. We didn't even know if these were her talking points. And we felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president. We talk a lot about the Republicans being autocrats and oligarchs and taking over democracy, but from the Democrat perspective, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, I felt like the Democratic Party completely removed the democratic process from its.
Chad says these guys are exclusively focused on vibes, and Bernie's talking about policy. 100% agree. That's why I showed that clip of Andrew on trigonometry talking about Democrats used to be cool. Now Republicans are cool, and I just want to be cool. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not. Do you hear yourself? He just wants to be popular. He just wants to be in the popular kids club. The adult world is high school with money, y'all. High school with money and power. And he wants to be a part of the cool kids club. He doesn't want to be a nerd. He doesn't want to be in there in the corner with the weirdos. He wants to be in part of the cool kids club. And that's all he cares about.
Constituents. And I think they need to have some accountability of that.
No argument here.
I donated for you. I mean, I wanted you to, like, 2016, I was like, this is going to happen. This guy's going to do it. And it felt like they stole it from me. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart when you supported him.
Look, but you have, in the world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
Well, because it's easy to say, burning it down means that children are not going to have, food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And I'm an elected official. I got to represent the people.
That's fair.
And I can't turn my back on.
And that's really important to pay attention to. Is like the system sucks as it is, and we do have to worry about it. But I don't know about you, and I don't know what people mean when they say burn it to the ground. But burn it to the ground sounds like people who are like, I just want to grow my own vegetables. I don't want to grow my own vegetables. I want to improve the system. I want to deconstruct it. So let's talk about deconstruction. Deconstruction is when you pull it apart to put it back together again, but you pull it apart to understand it in detail. I'm going to take the system and pull it apart and figure out ways to make it better. But the reason I say we have to tie this to philosophical framework and we have to tie this to human nature is we have to tie it to the limitations of our own biological experience. We are limited biologically. We are limited in our ability to process information at a large scale. And we are dealing with a very large scale, right? And so again, when I say things like, and this is meant to help you as the individual, when I say, if I can't even make people in my family get it, how am I going to make strangers get it? Now, psychologically, I am actually more likely to convince a stranger to my position than a family member, because family members have a bias about you. And so they don't want to listen to their daughter be right, or they don't want to listen to their sister be right, or they don't want to listen to anyone be right. They want to listen to somebody else who they assume knows more because they don't know them. Because it's hard to admit that the people in our life know more than us, right? So I am much more likely to convince strangers than I ever am to convince my family members. But the reason why we have to pay attention to why it is so difficult is so we don't feel so lost and worthless in our attempt to make the world a better place. It is never wrong to attempt to make the world a better place. I just don't want it to eat you up from the inside out because, Habibi, it was never your burden to carry. It was simply the burden you have decided to carry, and I need you to decide to carry it, because if you feel like it was put upon you, it's going to feel like a cage. Don't let it be a cage. Let it be a choice, but make sure it's a choice that coincides with your joy. And I say this as somebody who talked to her therapist about this during 2016 when I had an absolute breakdown over Trump winning. And she told me, who told you you were going to be Superman? Well, kind of everybody, girl. Kind of everybody. Ever since I was a little girl, my parents would say, you could be the president. You could really help people. Brittany's going to be president. And I really believed in some part of my head that I wanted to be like those protesters we saw in the 1970s, or the people who were fighting for desegregation, or these people who were fighting for civil rights. Like, I really romanticized activism. And I think we do that now. We really romanticize activism instead of recognizing that marginalized communities have to be activists to just get the basics. And then in that case, it's not too romantic, is it? At that point, it's just fucking exhausting. And it feels like I shouldn't even have to do this. But the romanticization is also a part of what they sell you in regards to the bubble. Look at these amazing pictures. You know that picture of Bernie Sanders that's always going around? Hold on. Bernie arrested. You guys know this picture? This picture of Bernie is always going around, and everyone's like, oh my God, Bernie Sanders, he's amazing. You know, he's getting arrested, protesting segregation, right? And everyone's like, whoa. And then they see this photo and they're like, oh my God, this is like amazing. Look at this man. He really believed it. And everyone says like, oh, you think this Bernie is pro-establishment? Yeah, why not? You can be anti-segregation and pro-establishment, but you can also be progressive for the time. Listen, I caucused for Bernie. I was a fan of Bernie. I'm not anti-Bernie as a person. I just don't think he's as progressive anymore for the way that we need him to be in this climate, in a way that would matter. And somebody in chat said it earlier that Bernie's not a leader. Sometimes you grow too old to be a leader. Sometimes it's about being in your prime because it takes spoons. And then sometimes the reality is that just because you're an activist doesn't mean you're meant to be a leader. Being a leader is a very specific role. I myself don't think I am leader material. I might be later in my life, but I certainly am not. I might have a dominant personality, and I know because I heard it all my life. Oh my God, Brittany, you should be the leader. People would pick me in group settings to be the leader, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm not actually a leader. Like, I'm just dominant and confident. But I am not actually like leader material, like, because I think leader material requires you to understand the nuances of what you're leading, to dedicate your life to being there for your community in a specific way. I think it takes a lot to be a good leader, and I don't think I'm qualified, which is interesting because I would argue neither is Trump, but you know, and somebody says that. Somebody says like, well, if Trump thinks he's a leader, then you could be a leader. Yeah, but Trump thinking he could be the leader isn't the problem. Like, that's the problem. Is that people like Trump, people like me, shouldn't be arrogant enough to think we can lead. We should be humble enough to know we can't. We need to earn that. We need to have a relationship where we could be those people, not to assume that we are just because we're loud. Okay.
But then could we not also say, if ostensibly there hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008, are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear...
Fair enough. That is, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that point. And that's why I'm proudly an independent, what we're trying to do now.
Wait, Chad says I find leading as serving in a way. Absolutely. Exactly my point. To be a leader is to serve the community. I am too, and I know this about myself, I'm in a very personal journey right now. I cannot serve the community in that way. I'm very much in my research era. I'm very much in my aging into my 50s era. I'm very much on a very personal journey right now. And you can't be on a personal journey and be a leader for a community, because when you're serving a community, there's a part of you that gets pushed to the side. And that's why you have to recognize that being a leader isn't about you. It's about the people you're leading. That's why it's a sacrifice. And that's why it's scary when you get really arrogant, narcissistic men volunteering to be leaders when they don't know the first thing about service.
And I will just reinforce the point both of you made. The hatred that we felt in 2016, 2020 from the Democratic establishment. I'll give you an example. We would do rallies and we have thousands of people, often young people, people of color coming out, working class people coming out. They were great, full of energy. Yeah. And then we go to Democratic Party events. There'd be a few hundred people, mostly older, whiter, wealthier. And you saw the clash. And the establishment did not want to open the door. They hated the idea. But all these people whose hands were a little bit dirty, who didn't have PhDs or weren't wealthy, imagine walking in, it's my party, man. You ain't getting in.
Yes.
We will fight you in the most ruthless ways that we can. And that's the struggle. Are they going to open the door, or are they prepared to lose elections, literally, and maintain, go down with the Titanic? So that is.
Do you think you're forcing the door open? Because it seems like that's what's happening right now.
Exactly what we are trying to do. Right now, in the last month, we have enlisted some, I think the latest 7,000 people who are prepared to run for office from school board to Congress. Wow. Not all of them will run, but they've shown interest. There are training programs that we're undertaking with other groups right now. And by the way, a good percentage of
By the way, the title of this segment is Are the Democrats Also a Threat to Democracy?
don't want to run as Democrats, they want to run as independents.
So do you sense from the Democratic establishment that they're more willing to listen to people like you, or are you guys just going to have to kind of take it by force and win elections?
Are they, well, I don't want to, are they more willing to listen to me? No, they're not.
But they'll take on some of your ideas for salvation. Yeah. They realize
often
they can't ignore it.
Often lip service. Yeah. Yes, they will take on the ideas, but these guys, they want to protect what they have. So your question is you would say, look, okay. And by the way, Joe Biden, to his credit, I know everyone beats up on Biden, but what Biden did, unlike Hillary Clinton did, is he and his people saw that we had a movement. And what he did was prepared to put together task forces. We sat down with their people, and we brought people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of the strongest. We were sit down with establish and come up with a program. A lot of what went into the American Rescue Plan, which got us out of the COVID pandemic economically pretty well, and some other stuff. So the Biden people were more open to sitting down, understanding that we represented millions of people than other people in the past, or are right now.
I feel like most politicians are swayed by money and lobbyists, and that, like, I wouldn't say dictates, but it definitely influences their decisions. You feel like one of the last honest politicians. Can you tell me what other politicians have the Bernie stamp of approval that they're like honest?
Yeah, who's not bought?
Oh, there are a number of people. Look, one of the successes that we've had that doesn't get a lot of attention is in the House of Representatives now, there are dozens and dozens of young, often people of color, often women, who are there. I mean, Alexandria is maybe the best known, but Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, Greg Kazar from Texas, Mark Buchan from Wisconsin. There are many of them, and they're doing a great job. And
we should start paying attention to younger people. I was thinking about that I have laxed on. I used to know everybody. When I was in the political bubble, I feel like I could name everybody. I could name everybody in office, senators. I felt like I was so in tune to like everything happening. I could name policy. I could reference things. But because I've been out of the political bubble, I don't know who's there. I don't know who's young and in there. I see people and I go, oh, I wonder who that is. But I've been away from the bubble in that sense. I'm still just paying attention to the boomers. But I think we should start doing that too. I haven't seen as much of it even on streams and things. I think we're forgetting that the next generation is here and we should start paying attention to them because one of them is definitely going to be president. The question is, who's it going to be, right? Like which of the young people now it will eventually be. And JD Vance was a part of that group. Technically, he's not that much older than me, right? So I think that's a part of it too, is like, I'm not a fan of, obviously we're not fans of JD Vance on this channel, but the fact that he is one of the young ones and he is very much probably going to be president. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, ooh, something to pay attention to, right?
They don't take corporate PAC money and they stand up for the working class.
Yeah. By the way, guys, this episode is also...
Okay, that's it right there. That's the segment I wanted to show you. It's the first part of the segment is really what people were really upset about. And I just want you to keep in mind that everybody is progressive for their era, but there is a point if you don't keep deconstructing and keep moving towards progression, you will just eventually become a conservative. Okay? Okay.